has issued a subpoena to the estate of convicted sex offender Jeffrey Epstein. The subpoena seeks documents and other material related to the House Oversight Committee's investigation into Mr. Epstein. The estate has until September 8th to turn over the documents that the investigators want. So let's bring in CBS News Justice reporter Jake Rosen, joining us now once again from Washington. So what does the subpoena demand?
Well, a number of things, Reed. The first of which is that book for Jeffrey Epstein's 50th birthday, which the Wall Street Journal reported earlier this year. President Trump signed and left a personalized note for him inside of that. In addition to that, it's generally just dozens and dozens of types of documents that they're seeking that are not related to specifically the Department of Justice investigation, of which those documents started to be handed over last week to the House Oversight Committee. But in this case, it's specifically some of Epstein's personal belongings or things that he left in his wake after he died. Some of those, obviously, Jeffrey Epstein's will, one of them, potential references in any kind of documents he had to vice presidents and presidents. In addition to that, videos of Epstein's properties, and also that non-prosecution agreement that is at the center of that first kind of botched investigation into Epstein, in which the former Trump labor secretary in the first administration, Alex Acosta, reached a deal, allegedly, with Epstein, who said that if he pled guilty to specific charges, which he later did, that nobody surrounding him in any kind of co-conspirator like Ghislaine Maxwell or somebody else would be charged. That prosecution agreement, I should say, is at the center of a lot of the conspiracies and back and forth about what the Department of Justice knew, what it didn't know at that time, and why Epstein was allowed to continue being a free man after he eventually went back to civil life before he was re-arrested years later.
Such a thirst for transparency in this story. It seems like there's a new headline every week. Jake Rosen, we appreciate that. But I also want to ask you, while we have you, you're out and about getting coffee as you start your day. Kids are out there by the thousands starting their day at school today, the first week of school. What are you seeing and what are kids seeing as we're starting to see this shift in the landscape and the visibility out there in Washington, D.C.?
That's right. There's well over 2,000 National Guard deployed on shifts throughout the city. You can see them at transit hubs and metro stops, which are our equivalent of the subway for those who are not familiar in the district. In addition to that, even just on a commute to work this morning, there were a number of National Guardsmen near federal buildings, near for instance, the ATF, near the National Mall, where tourists are still going, even though schools have started in some parts of the country and here as well. In addition to what we've seen is the Trump administration tout, and this streak was ended early this morning, but there was a 11-day murder-free stretch here in the nation's capital. That length of time had not been accomplished since earlier this year in March. Obviously, that was before the federal takeover, but still a decent amount of stretch of time without there being a homicide in the city that was recorded. At the same time, our CBS News data shows that there's been about a 55% year-to-year drop in crime when you compare the last 5 years all averaged together, going back to pre-pandemic, compared to what the Trump administration has done in this stretch. As we know and have talked about, Reed, that National Guard presence throughout many areas, in addition to the threat of federal law enforcement driving throughout the city, arresting people, a lot of those immigration arrests have been a real deterrent, it looks like, at least according to our CBS News data.
Also want to ask you about this, Jake. A federal judge in Pennsylvania has dismissed a DOJ lawsuit against an entire Maryland federal bench. This is sweeping. Walk us through this case.
Well, that's right. There was an order, and it's still in place now because this judge allowed it to stand, that was reached and irked the Trump administration so much that they decided to sue all 15 federal judges in Maryland. What this order did was anytime somebody feared potential deportation or was detained and had lawyers file for a habeas petition, which is to basically take a moment and try to block that deportation, the Maryland judges agreed that this is happening at such a rate throughout the state, and not just the state but the country, that they needed a 48-hour block on any kind of potential deportation if a lawsuit is filed in their state. That really irked the Trump administration to the point where Pam Bondi and the Justice Department got involved. They sued to try to strike it down, which would have allowed the Trump administration to deport people even faster, and potentially, Reed, before they even had a chance to have their case heard before getting in front of a judge, which really was the case in many situations. Think about Kilmar Abrego Garcia for one. A judge from Virginia was assigned to this case to oversee because all the Maryland judges had a conflict of interest, and he sided with the judges, saying that the Trump administration should have just gone through the normal ways of appealing court decisions, not to sue personally all these 15 judges.
Jake Rosen, thank you so much for those updates.